It all started with a simple request, or at least that's what it looked like on the surface. In a boardroom filled with polished suits, expensive watches, and the kind of fake smiles that only money can buy, an elite executive leaned across the table, tapped her pen twice, and said, "Clean this up." Her voice was sharp, cold, the kind that didn't leave room for questions. She was used to being obeyed, used to people scrambling to fix things just to keep her happy. But today, she picked the wrong person. Across from her sat someone who didn't come from money, didn't care about titles, and definitely wasn't about to be spoken to like that. She had spent years building something meaningful, not just a company, but a vision. And behind that quiet confidence was a woman who knew her worth. So instead of nodding or apologizing, she looked the executive dead in the eye and calmly canceled the entire $50 million funding deal. You could hear a pin drop. Phones were suddenly still. Eyes darted around the room, trying to make sense of what just happened. No one saw it coming. This wasn't just a power move. It was a moment that exposed the fragile ego of the elite, the imbalance of power in big business, and the quiet strength of someone who finally said enough. But what exactly led to that bold decision? Why did a deal worth millions fall apart over a single comment? And what happened next as both sides tried to recover from the fallout? The story behind it is deeper than just money. It's about respect, boundaries, and the hidden pressure women face in high-stakes environments. And trust me, you'll lead. Want to hear what came next? A few weeks before that explosive meeting, everything looked promising. The startup led by Maya Sharp, driven and respected in her industry, was on the verge of closing a huge funding round. $50 million from one of the top investment firms in the country. It was the kind of deal that could scale her company overnight. But behind the scenes, cracks had already started to show. The firm's lead partner, Victoria, had a reputation, polished and powerful, but with a subtle edge that often crossed into arrogance. She didn't see partnerships, she saw control. From the very first meeting, there were little red flags. The way she interrupted, the way she talked over Maya during presentations, and how she constantly pushed for changes that had nothing to do with strategy and everything to do with appearance, branding, optics. Make it more polished, she would say. Tone down the messaging, it's a little too bold. But Maya had built her company by being bold. It wasn't just a product hit, was her story, her values, her voice. Still, she stayed calm, trying to balance the line between collaboration and compromise. Until that final meeting when Victoria crossed it. "Clean this up," she snapped. Referring to a community-focused initiative Maya refused to cut. It wasn't part of the financial projections, but it was the heart of their brand. That was the moment Maya realized this deal wasn't a partnership. It was a takeover. What Victoria didn't expect was that Maya had options. She had quietly lined up backup investors, people who believed in her vision, not just the numbers. But still, walking away from $50 million wasn't easy. It was a gamble, one that sent shockwaves through the boardroom. And as the news spread, so did the questions. What would happen next? After the meeting, word spread fast, first through quiet texts between assistants, then whispered calls between board members, and finally onto the desks of rival investors. Maya had just walked away from a $50 million deal. Most people assumed it was a mistake. Some even called it career suicide. But those who knew her well saw something different. A calculated risk, not an emotional reaction. Still, not everyone on her team agreed. Inside her own office, tensions were rising. Her coup, Daniel, had spent months negotiating with Victoria's firm. To him, this deal was the finish line. "Do you realize what we just gave up?" he asked, pacing the room. This wasn't just funding. This was visibility, influence, access. Maya didn't answer right away. She knew he wasn't wrong. But she also knew what it would have cost them control over their mission, their message, and possibly their integrity. Meanwhile, over at Victoria's firm, the fallout was messy. Her team scrambled to control the narrative. They blamed creative differences, but investors weren't buying it. People began questioning whether Victoria's aggressive leadership style had finally gone too far. And privately, she was. Furious not just about the lost deal, but about being defied in public. Maya, on the other hand, found herself under a new kind of spotlight. Some media outlets framed her as fearless. Others called her reckless. Every interview request wanted the same thing: why did you walk away? But she stayed quiet, at least for now. Behind the scenes, she was working on something, a pivot, a new partner with deeper values alignment. But nothing was final yet, and as all of this played out, another challenge was quietly building. Someone from inside her own company was starting to question her leadership, and they weren't staying quiet much longer. The pressure was mounting, and Maya could feel it. What started as a bold decision was now spiraling into something much bigger. Investors who once admired her confidence were starting to get nervous. The media coverage was relentless. Headlines twisted the story, some calling her a trailblazer, others calling her unstable. Every step she took was being watched, picked apart. But the real trouble wasn't out there. What was brewing inside her own company. Daniel had started taking meetings without her. He said it was just to keep the business steady, to reassure stakeholders. But Maya could sense something shifting. Their once strong partnership now felt tense, guarded. Late-night emails stopped being collaborative. Meetings grew shorter, colder. And then, quietly, a few team members began jumping ship, people Maya had trusted from the beginning. She didn't want to believe it, but something was off. At the same time, Victoria wasn't letting go of the narrative. She'd started using her connections to cast doubt on Maya's leadership. A few influential voices in the tech space began echoing the same talking points: too emotional, too risky, unpredictable. It was subtle, but intentional. A smear campaign disguised as industry concern. Behind closed doors, Maya's reputation was being chipped away. To make things worse, one of her remaining investors threatened to pull out if she didn't secure new funding soon. Time was running out. Every phone call, every conversation carried weight. And just when things couldn't get more tense, Maya received an anonymous tip. Someone from her leadership team had leaked internal documents to Victoria's firm. Documents that could damage their credibility. She didn't know who to trust. Everything she built felt like it was teetering on the edge. And with her next move, she'd either take back control, lose everything. Maya stared at the leaked documents. On her screen, her heart pounding. There it was: confidential projections, internal memos, even a draft pitch deck she hadn't shown anyone outside her core team. All now in the hands of the very people who wanted her to fail. And while she was still reeling from the betrayal, her phone buzzed again, an email from an investor she thought was firmly on her side. "We're reevaluating our involvement." She didn't have time to sit with the shock. Every second counted now. She needed to find out who leaked the documents, and fast. But when she confronted Daniel, his reaction wasn't what she expected. Calm to calm. He denied everything, of course, but there was something off in his tone. The words were right, but the energy was wrong. And then came the twist she never saw coming. The leak hadn't come from a rival trying to destroy her from the outside. It came from someone trying to replace her from within. Daniel had been quietly working with a group of board members, using her fallout with Victoria as leverage. They were pitching a new plan, one that involved removing Maya as CEO and installing Daniel in her place. He was painting it as a stability move, something to protect the company's future. Behind the scenes, they were already lining up emergency funding with firms that Maya had intentionally walked away from. Firms like Victoria's. The betrayal cut deep. Maya wasn't just fighting to keep her company alive anymore, she was fighting to keep her name on it. She had a few allies left and one last move to make. But with her leadership under threat and the funding clock ticking down, she had to decide: fight back publicly or outmaneuver them quietly before they made their next move. Maya didn't flinch. Not this time. She'd come too far, built too much to let it be stolen from under her. So while Daniel and his group thought they were pulling strings behind the scenes, Maya made her move quietly, precisely, and with the same calm resolve she showed in that boardroom. Weeks ago, she gathered the last of her loyal team and called an emergency strategy session. No presentations, no fluff, just facts. She laid out everything: her suspicions, the leak, the board's shift, and Daniel's backdoor dealings. It was a risk. If even one person in that room wasn't on her side, it could all fall apart. But what she didn't know was that one of them had been watching Daniel Tawand. They'd kept receipts. Within 48 hours, Maya's legal team drafted a full internal report linking the leaked documents to a private email thread involving Daniel and a junior associate from Victoria's firm. It was all there. The timelines, the files, the deal discussions, clear as day. She didn't go public with it. Not yet. Instead, she presented it directly to the board, along with something else, her ace, while Daniel was busy trying to replace her. Maya had finalized a quiet deal with a values-aligned impact fund based out of Europe. Not only did they agree to fully fund her company's next phase, but they also requested that she stay on as CEO. They'd seen the headlines and didn't flinch. They admired her for walking away from the original $50 million. The board flipped. Fast. Daniel was forced to resign. Victoria's firm issued a stiff no comment. And Maya, she walked back into her office with her title intact and a fresh round of ethical, mission-driven capital behind her. But just as she thought the storm had passed, her assistant walked in with a pale face and a tablet in hand. "You need to see this," she whispered. On the screen was a breaking article. A whistleblower from Victoria's firm had come forward with claims that could reopen everything Maya just put to rest. Maya stared at the screen. The headline was, "Bold Insider Accuses Top Investment Firm of Manipulative Deal Practices." It named names. Victoria's included Dand, detailed how firms like hers used pressure tactics, misleading term sheets, and back-channel deals to take over startups from their original founders. The whistleblower backed every claim with emails, call logs, and internal documents. It was the kind of story that didn't just fade. It sparked investigations. As news broke across business networks and social media, the narrative shifted overnight. Suddenly, Maya wasn't just the founder who walked away from a $50 million deal, she was the one who saw it coming. Her choice was no longer seen as risky. It was smart, principled, and ahead of its time. Investors who once hesitated were now calling her directly. Journalists wanted to know how she kept her vision intact, and for the first time in weeks, her team felt whole again. Daniel's departure left a scar. Sure, but it also cleared space for leadership that believed in the mission. Maya promoted from within, lifting up those who had stayed loyal when things were hardest. The new funding allowed them to expand, but on their terms, community first, transparent. And without the strings that had nearly choked everything they built. Looking back, Maya knew it wasn't just about business. It was about trust, integrity, and knowing when to walk away from something that looks like a dream on paper. Her story became more than just a power play in a boardroom. It became a reminder to every founder, leader, and creative that not all money is good money, and that sometimes the boldest move isn't saying yes, it's saying no. And as for Victoria, her empire started to crack one exposed lie at a time. But that's a story for another day.